The hiss of a plasma torch was the only thing that could momentarily drown out Steeler's wheel. Jerome Cap Ryland, his face illuminated by the angry blue-white flame, felt the lyrics to "Stuck in the Middle with You" burrowing into his skull like a parasitic earworm. Clowns to the left of him, jokers to the right. It was less a song and more a mission statement for his life. "Almost got the last glob of existential despair," he grunted, the torch sputtering. The protein reclamation vents of Port Olmos were not, as advertised, self-cleaning. They were, in fact, cosmic grease traps, accumulating a slurry of synthesized nutrients, lubricant runoff, and what Jerome could only describe as the ghost of a billion bad meals. From deeper inside the vent, a muffled, melodic hum vibrated through the metal. That was Boro. The 7-foot-tall mountain of granite-like flesh was folded into a space no being of his size should occupy. Gently scrubbing a particularly stubborn patch of grime while humming along to the tinny 70s rock classic. His humming was surprisingly delicate for a creature who looked like he was carved from a small asteroid. "The molecular structure is fascinating," came a voice from beside Jerome. Dr. Lena Kovac was on her knees, a portable scanner whirring as she analyzed a sample of the gunk she'd scraped into a petri dish. "It's a complex polymer of denatured proteins and long-chain hydrocarbons, almost sentient in its stickiness. If we could just isolate the bonding agent, we could revolutionize adhesive technology. Or, create a truly non-stick frying pan. The commercial applications are just staggering." "Lena, it's just space junk. The only staggering thing about it is the smell," Jerome said, shutting off the torch. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of a greasy glove. "Are we done here? The song's starting to make me want to cut my own ear off." A blur of gray fur and 6 limbs shot past his boots. Pip, the crew's resident Zib-Zibian kleptomaniac, skittered out of the vent shaft, chittering triumphantly. He held up a high-end thermal spanner, its chrome finish throwing back the torchlight even in the dim service corridor. It was definitely not theirs. Jerome sighed. "Pip, where'd you get that?" Pip let out a series of clicks and a whistle that sounded suspiciously like the words "floor" and "finders keepers." He tucked the spanner into one of the many pouches on his harness, patting it affectionately. "That floor belongs to the station's unionized maintenance crew, you fuzzy little felon," Jerome muttered. "The last thing we need is a grievance filed against Star Wipe Sanitation." He tapped the comms unit on his wrist. "Star Wipe to station accounts. We're done with the reclamation vents, Sector Gamma. Transmitting completion code now. So, about the payment..." The voice that crackled back was reedy and bureaucratic. "Payment for work order Omega Gamma 9 is pending review of invoice 6 Beta 4, which is currently flagged for excessive hourly billing." "Excessive? One of my guys had to be decontaminated for 3 hours after falling into a vat of what we think used to be tapioca pudding. You want to see excessive? I'll send you his therapy bills." "Regulations are regulations, Mr. Ryland. Furthermore, there's the matter of the docking fees, and the energy consumption tax, and the lingering odor fine." "A lingering odor fine? We're a cleaning crew. It's like giving a firefighter a ticket for water damage." The line went dead. Jerome slammed his fist against the vent wall, which just made his hand hurt and dislodged a fresh glob of slime that landed on his boot. He stared at it, defeated. The rent on their berth was due. The fuel tank was running on fumes. The noodle supply was dangerously low. Boro unfolded himself from the vent, the metal groaning in protest as he regained his full height. He looked surprisingly serene for a being who had just spent an hour contorted like a piece of cosmic origami. He patted Jerome gently on the shoulder with a hand the size of a dinner plate. "The universe provides, Captain." "Yeah, Boro." Jerome grumbled, kicking at the slime on his boot. "It provides gunk, fines, and terrible music." The bridge of the Star Wipe also served as its kitchen, lounge, and primary storage bay for Pip's acquisitions. The smell was a permanent cocktail of sparking circuits from the perpetually failing life support, burnt coffee from the perpetually malfunctioning pot, Pip's musky fur, and the stale, vaguely chicken-flavored air of their last noodle rations. Jerome was hunched over a flickering monitor, trying to juggle what little credit they had between fuel, food, and bribes for docking master phlegm. Lena was attempting to cross-reference her gunk sample with a galactic database of industrial waste, muttering about covalent bonds. Burrow was watching an ancient Earth film on a datapad, a 21st century romantic comedy. A single tear, clear as spun glass, traced a path down his rocky cheek.
"Her heart is a fragile bird, Captain,"
Burrow said, his voice thick with emotion.
"He must learn to build a nest of trust before she can sing a song of love."
"Right," Jerome said, not looking up from his pyramid of debt. "Nest of trust, got it." Suddenly, the main comms panel beeped, flashing a high-priority encryption Jerome hadn't seen since his Alliance days. He straightened up, his posture shifting unconsciously from slouched janitor to alert officer. Pip scurried over the console, his 6 spidery limbs moving independently. One tapped a sequence on a keypad, another slid a physical switch, and a third traced a path on the touchscreen. A series of clicks and whistles translated roughly to "High level, Governor's Office, Administrative Channel." Jerome's cynicism returned full force. "The Governor's Office doesn't call the roach exterminators. They just gas the building. Put it through." A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It showed a small, amphibian-like being in a pristine white curator's uniform, his throat pouch pulsing with anxiety. He blinked his wide, black eyes at the messy bridge. This was Tib-Tib, head curator of the Port Olmos Xenovarium.
Greetings,
he stammered, his voice a wet croak.
Am I addressing the proprietors of Star Wipe Sanitation?
"That's us," Jerome said, leaning back in his chair, folding his arms. "The galaxy's premier removers of unwanted filth and shattered dreams. What can we do for you, Mr.
Tib-Tib, I have a proposal from the Governor Vane's office."
He swallowed nervously.
"It concerned a one-night contract, a full hygienic overhaul of the Xenovarium's primary predator wing, Sector A."
Lena looked up from her work, her eyes wide with academic excitement. "The Xenovarium? But that houses some of the largest and rarest and most dangerous megafauna in the known galaxy. The biocontainment safeguards alone are—" Jerome held up a hand, silencing her. He squinted at the nervous curator. "Predator wing. Sounds expensive and dangerous. We're cheap, and we're trying to be less dangerous, so why us? What happened to the last crew?" Tib-Tib's throat pouch inflated to the size of a small melon.
OmniClean Corporation, a highly reputable firm. They encountered a minor biohazard incident.
"Define a minor biohazard incident," Jerome said, his voice flat.
"Mauling,"
Tib-Tib squeaked, the words rushing out.
"The junior technician in charge of sterilizing the Calgorian Soulflayer's feeding trough. He got too close. The creature's psychic scream alone flash-boiled the water in his eyeballs before the claws did their work. OmniClean terminated their contract immediately, as did the next 3 firms that we contacted."
There it was, the other shoe. A 10-ton boot made of razor blades and bad decisions. "So you're scraping the bottom of the barrel?"
"The Governor's office has authorized a substantial hazard payment,"
Tib-Tib said, desperation coloring his tone.
"Triple your standard rate."
Triple their rate? It was a lifeline. A greasy, blood-soaked, probably going to get them killed lifeline. It would pay the rent, fill the tank, and buy enough noodles to last a month. Jerome looked at his crew. At Lena, whose intellectual curiosity was visibly wrestling with her profound anxiety. At Boro, whose gentle soul would probably try to reason with a creature called a soul flayer. At Pip, who was likely calculating the resale value of a soul flayer's tooth. This was his family, and they were starving. "Fine," Jerome said. "We'll take it. Send the contract." As Tib fumbled with his datapad, his holographic image flickered with a burst of static from the star-wiped shoddy projector. In that split second of distortion, Pip, unseen by the curator, scurried to the base of the holographic projector. One of his 6 hands held a small, jury-rigged device that hummed faintly. He pressed it against the projector's casing. A thin tendril of light snaked from Pip's device to the projector, and on a tiny screen on his wrist, a progress bar filled instantly. A wavering, digital outline of the security pass appeared on Pip's screen with a soft chime of success. He had copied the encrypted security key right out of the data stream in less than a second. He tucked his device away with satisfied chitters. The Xenovarium was everything the Star Wipe was not. It was silent, sterile, and immense. Polished chrome walkways crisscrossed above holographic jungle environments. The air was crisp, filtered to the sharp scent of air scrubbers and manufactured rain. The architecture was a monument to control, a sleek, imposing cage for the galaxy's nightmares.
"And this,"
Tib said, his webbed hands trembling as he gestured towards a massive triple-paned wall of armored glass,
"is the primary enclosure. Welcome to Subject 01, the Kralgorian Soul Flayer."
Behind the glass, something moved in the simulated twilight. It was huge, a creature of chitinous black plates, sinewy muscle, and far too many limbs, each ending in a blade of obsidian-like bone. Its head was a nightmarish fusion of an insect and a wolf, with multiple glowing red eyes that scanned the habitat with predatory rage. As they watched, it lunged at a fortified feeding station, tearing a foot-long gash in the durasteel plating with a screech that vibrated in their teeth, even through the soundproof glass.
"Now, the safety procedure is paramount,"
Tib whispered, sweat beading on his brow.
"Never make direct eye contact. Its psychic assault is triggered by perceived challenges to its dominance. Do not wear the color yellow. It agitates its territorial instincts. And for the love of the great spawning, do not, under any circumstances, make any sudden moves or loud noises. The last crew."
He shuddered. Jerome looked at his team. Lena was scribbling notes furiously on a datapad. Boro was looking at the creature with an expression of profound sadness. Pip was eyeing a loose maintenance panel on the wall.
"Right,"
Jerome said, his voice dripping with gallows humor. "No eye contact, no yellow, no fun. Got it. Let's get this freak show on the road." He led his crew along the walkway. As they drew level with the enclosure, the soul flayer stopped. The creature, which had been in the middle of a ferocious, habitat-destroying tantrum, froze mid-snarl, its bladed limbs going still. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its monstrous head toward the walkway. Its glowing red eyes, which were supposed to flash boil the water in your eyeballs, softened. It lowered its head, a gesture of profound, unbelievable deference. From the monster's throat came a low, vibrating sound. Not a screech of rage, but a deep, purring chuff. The deadliest predator in the Galactic Zoo bowed to them. The crew stopped dead. Jerome stared, his cynical brain refusing to process what his eyes were seeing.
Did that thing just..."
Lena's mouth hung open. "Inconceivable. The literature describes Kralgorians as pathologically aggressive, incapable of social submission outside their matriarchal hive structure." Boro, however, simply smiled. A warm, gentle smile that crinkled the rock-like skin around his eyes.
He seems polite.
They continued walking, shell-shocked. They passed the next enclosure, housing a flock of scythe talons, sleek, feathered carnivores known for eviscerating their prey in swarms. As the crew approached, the scythe talons, who had been shrieking and fighting over a carcass, fell silent. They folded their metallic wings and bowed their crested heads in unison. Next was the chittering maw of Othos, a semi-amorphous blob of teeth and tentacles that was supposed to dissolve anything it touched. It retracted its tentacles and became placid, its constant, terrifying chittering softening into a gentle hum. One by one, every alpha predator, every genetic nightmare, every creature on the do not approach under penalty of agonizing death list became a silent, reverent welcoming party. The silence was broken by a soft thud. Tib-Tib, the curator, had fainted. His little amphibian body sprawled out on the polished chrome floor. Jerome just stared back at the soul flayer, who was now peacefully grooming one of its scythe-like appendages like a house cat. For the first time in a decade, Jerome Ryland had no sarcastic comeback. He was utterly, completely, and bafflingly speechless. Governor Sullian Vane's office was an exercise in minimalist power. A single desk of black volcanic glass sat in the center of a cavernous room, with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the star-dusted abyss. Vane himself was as sleek and polished as his surroundings. A man in a perfectly tailored suit, whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes.
Mr. Ryland, Dr. Kovac, Boro.
"Pip," he said, gesturing to the uncomfortable-looking chairs before his desk. Pip, of course, ignored the chair and instead began tapping the desk's anti-gravity emitters, his head cocked as he listened to the faint hum.
Governor,
Jerome said, keeping his tone neutral.
I assume you saw the security footage?
I have, Vane said, steepling his fingers. Fascinating. An anomaly of the highest order. My science division is stumped. My xenobiologists are weeping into their microscopes, and my curator is under sedation. He leaned forward, his polished facade cracking just enough to show the avarice beneath. I don't care how you do it. I care that you do it. He slid a datapad across the desk. It wasn't a termination of contract. It was a new one. Your official designation will remain Starwipe Sanitation, Vane explained. Publicly, you are my new permanent hygiene solution for the Xenovarium. The paperwork will reflect that. It's cleaner. No one looks twice at janitors. Jerome picked up the datapad. The payment terms made his breath catch in his throat. It was a number with an absurd, life-altering number of zeros. Enough to buy a new ship. A fleet of new ships. Enough to retire to a private moon and never smell synthesized noodle broth again. Then he saw his new job description. The old one had been pages of technical specifications and safety warnings. This one had a single, elegantly vague clause. To maintain atmospheric and behavioral equilibrium within Xenovarium Sector A. What does that even mean? Lena asked, peering at the datapad. It means you show up, Vane said. You walk the corridors, you sit, you read, you breathe. Whatever it is that you people do that turns my gallery of horrors into a petting zoo, you will continue to do it, exclusively for me. This was no promotion. This was a pair of golden handcuffs. Vane wasn't celebrating a miracle. He was classifying a resource. He had found his golden goose, and he was hiding it in a janitor's closet. Your debt with the station has been cleared, Vane added, as if closing a simple business deal. A company apartment has been allocated to you, adjacent to the Xenovarium, for convenience. For surveillance, Jerome thought, to keep the assets close. He looked at his crew. Boro was looking out at the massive window towards the stars, a placid expression on his face. Lena was already lost in thought, her mind racing with 1,000 theories. Pip was trying to subtly pry the insignia off of Vane's pen with one of his smaller claws. They were trapped. Trapped by a salary they couldn't refuse, and a phenomenon they didn't understand.
"Welcome to the team,"
Vane said, his smile finally looking genuine. It was the smile of a man who had just added a priceless, one-of-a-kind asset to his portfolio. Jerome didn't feel like an employee. He felt like an exhibit. The first week was surreal. The new apartment was clean, so clean it felt hostile. The air didn't smell like anything. Not coffee, not burnt wiring, not even recycled oxygen. It was a perfect, sterile vacuum that made Jerome's lungs ache for the familiar, the homey stink of his own failing ship. There were no creaks, no sputtering circuits, no comforting grime. It was a cage, its bars forged from silence and antiseptic surfaces. Despite this, the opening chords of Red Bone's Come and Get Your Love seemed to be the universe's chosen soundtrack for their new, bizarre lives. The montage played out in a haze of comfortable absurdity. Jerome, a man who hadn't sat still for more than 5 minutes in 20 years, found a surprisingly comfortable spot on a maintenance catwalk overlooking the Soul Flayer's habitat. He'd brought a stack of pulpy, pre-diaspora detective novels he'd always meant to read. Below him, the horrifying killing machine would curl up on a heated rock and nap, its purring a low, seismic rumble that vibrated up through the metal. It was oddly soothing. Lena was in heaven. She had full, unrestricted access to the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, who were now acting like placid lab rats. With Boro standing guard, a task that mostly involved him meditating peacefully, she collected saliva swabs from the scythe talons, skin cell samples from the chittering maw of Othos, and atmospheric readings from every enclosure. Her quarters, a significant upgrade from the Star Wipe, but still hopelessly cluttered, were quickly filled with humming analyzers and bubbling beakers. Boro became the Xenovarium's unofficial storyteller. He would sit cross-legged before the enclosures, his cheerful voice calmly reciting ancient Lithian epic poems, or more often, giving surprisingly insightful plot summaries of the rom-coms he also adored. The beasts would watch him, their supposedly primitive minds captivated. Pip predictably treated the state-of-the-art facility as his personal shopping mall. A focusing lens from a laser grid, a memory crystal from a habitat control panel, a hydrospanner from a water filtration unit. They all found their way into his seemingly bottomless pouches. Publicly, the change was a sensation. A news screen in the station's main concourse flashed with updated metrics. Visitor satisfaction plus 58%, ticket sales plus 62%. And the most telling statistic of all, the one that glittered like a diamond in a coal mine, violent incidents in Sector A, minus 100%. Life was, for the first time, easy. The money was real, the threat of eviction was gone. But as Jerome turned a page in his novel, feeling the soul flares rumble through the sole of his boots, a familiar cynicism began to fester. This was too good, too easy, and the bright, shining negative 100% on the public news feed felt less like a trophy and more like a bullseye. In a lounge deep within the lawless shadow sector of the Omega Proxima station, the air was thick with the smoke of exotic spices and the low murmur of illicit deals. Light was a commodity here, used sparingly to illuminate glasses of glowing liquid and the glint of weapons. The figure sat alone at a secluded table, her form clad in a form-fitting suit of matte black armor that drank the surrounding light, leaving a human-shaped hole in the room. Her helmet was featureless, a mirrored visor hiding her face. This was the Serpent, a name spoken in fearful whispers in the black markets and corporate boardrooms of a dozen systems. She was a ghost, a legend, a beastmaster who specialized in acquiring the unacquirable. Her broker, a gaunt kith, his two prehensile headstalks twitching nervously, slid a datapad onto her table.
The target is as you requested, a prime specimen, Kralgorian soul flare. The client, a certain warlord with a taste for intimidating pets, is prepared to pay the price that we discussed.
The Serpent didn't move. Her voice, filtered through her helmet's comms, was calm, genderless, and cold as deep space. The Port Olmos Xenovarium, Vane's pet project. Security is top tier. The frontal assault would be messy, loud.
That was the initial assessment,
The broker agreed, leaning closer.
a bloody smash and grab. High risk, high reward. But new intel has emerged. Something strange.
He tapped the datapad, and a holographic chart flared to life above the table. It was the same public metric Jerome had seen.
Look at this.
The broker hissed, pointing a slender finger at the glowing number.
Violent incidents in Sector A, minus 100%, for 3 consecutive weeks.
The Serpent's head tilted slightly. Impressive maintenance.
Impressive. This result is a fiction.
The broker insisted.
They are not hamsters. They are apex predators. A sustained drop of 100% defies fundamental xenobiology. It's an anomaly so profound, it confesses a secret.
He swiped the display, bringing up a personnel file. It was for Starwipe Sanitation. 4 grainy photos appeared. A tired-looking human male, a nervous-looking human female, a giant rock man, and a blurry shape that was probably the Zibzibian.
Someone or something,
The broker said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
has tamed the untamable, and Vane has hidden them in plain sight, disguised as janitors.
The Serpent stared at the images. The plan in her mind shifted, refined itself. A bloody smash and grab was for amateurs. This required finesse, surgery.
The beasts are no longer the primary target,
She said, her voice a flat, deadly monotone.
they are merely the contents.
The real prize is the key to the cage.
I've got it!
Lena burst out of her bedroom turned laboratory, waving a datapad, her eyes wild with the thrill of discovery. She had been running simulations for days, fueled by nutrient paste and a manic energy that worried Jerome.
It's not us, not exactly anyways,
She said, pacing back and forth.
it's our mitochondria, specifically the waste products from our cellular respiration. Humans evolved on a planet with a unique atmospheric composition, bombarded by a specific spectrum of solar radiation. Over millions of years, it created a subtle but distinct biosignature.
Jerome raised an eyebrow.
You're saying that we have a special brand of body odor?
Don't be reductive.
Lena snapped, then took a deep breath.
Okay, be a little reductive.
The Kralgorians, their homeworld had a flora that produced a very specific type of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon.
It's a complex organic molecule. Their matriarchs, when gestating, emit a pheromone that contains a nearly identical molecular structure. It's a signal that says, I am the queen. I am the source of life. Be calm, be subservient.
She took another frantic breath.
Our mitochondrial exhaust, when aerosolized in a recycled oxygen environment like a space station, undergoes a chemical change. The trace elements, right? The specific isotopes, they mimic that gestation pheromone. perfectly.
Jerome stared at her.
So, let me get this straight. We smell, to them, like a pregnant queen monster.
In the most basic terms, yes.
Lena confirmed, a triumphant grin spreading across her face.
We smell like a combination of a tire fire and lilacs. It makes them want to curl up and ask us for a bedtime story.
Boro, who'd been listening intently from the doorway, nodded.
A mother's love is the universe's most powerful force. It is known.
Just then, Jerome's comlink, which he'd synced to the station's internal security network out of old habit, chirped softly. There was a feed from a hidden microphone in Vane's office. A little parting gift from Pip. Vane's voice was crisp and clear.
No, the patent application has to be discreet. We can't patent the humans themselves. That is a legal minefield. We need to patent their biological output. The aerosolized pheromonal signature. We'll synthesize it, bottle it, sell it as the ultimate predator pacification tool. The janitors are just a temporary, fleshy delivery system.
Jerome's blood ran cold. Lena's face fell, her triumphant grin dissolving. They weren't employees. They weren't even exhibits. They were livestock, being fattened up before the harvest.
He's gonna bottle our breath,
Jerome said, the words tasting like ash.
And then he's not gonna need us anymore.
The comfortable cage had just gotten a lot smaller. The quiet hum of the Xenovarium's after-hours life support was their new normal. Jerome was halfway through the big sleep, the soul flare snoozing below. Lena was recalibrating a spectrometer. Boro was quietly polishing a smooth riverstone. Pip was somewhere, probably committing a petty felony. Then the world turned red. The main lights cut out, replaced by the strobing pulse of crimson energy beacons. A klaxon began to blare, a deafening station-wide shriek. Warning! Unidentified hostiles detected in Sector Delta. Code Omega. All personnel to secure locations. This is not a drill. With a series of thunderous, echoing booms, massive blast doors slammed down, sealing every corridor, every sector, every exit. The Xenovarium had just become a sealed tomb. Jerome, Lena, and Boro scrambled to the main security console near the entrance. The monitors, which usually showed tranquil habitats, now displayed chaotic scenes from around the station. Then, every screen went black. A moment later, they all flickered back to life, but with a new, unified image. A simple, elegant symbol of a serpent eating its own tail. The station-wide klaxon cut out, replaced by a voice. It was the same calm, cold, filtered voice from the Shadow Sector lounge, now broadcast across the entire station's PA system.
Good evening, Port Ulmos. This is the Serpent. There has been a minor but necessary security breach. For your own safety, all sectors will remain in lockdown until our operation is complete. Do not interfere. Do not attempt to be heroes. We are professionals. This will be clean, quiet, and efficient. Thank you for your cooperation. On one of the few monitors still linked to the Xenovarium's internal cameras, they saw them. Figures in identical matte black armor, emerging silently from maintenance hatches and ventilation shafts in the service corridors. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators. They were inside. Another monitor showed a feed from outside Governor Vane's office. They watched as the governor, his face a mask of pure terror, scrambled into a hidden panel inside his wall. A Durasteel panic room hissed shut behind him. He was no villain, no mastermind, just a coward. Jerome looked at the blast doors, then at the monitor showing the silent, approaching hunters. They weren't here for the beasts. The one on the comms had confirmed it. They were here for the janitors. They were on their own, trapped in a cage with far more dangerous kinds of predators. The darkened corridors of the Xenovarium
once a place of bizarre tranquility, were now a hunting ground. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows that turned familiar shapes into lurking monsters. The only sounds were the thrum of the sealed-in ventilation and the frantic beating of their own hearts. "This way," Jerome whispered, pulling Lena and Boro into a cramped alcove behind a bank of nutrient dispensers. "They'll be sweeping the main walkways first." As if on cue, two of the Serpent's mercs moved past their position, their footsteps utterly silent on the chrome floor. They moved back to back, rifles up, their overlapping fields of fire leaving no corner unchecked. They were ghosts in black armor. Pip suddenly dropped from a ceiling conduit, landing silently beside them. He held up a small device he'd clearly liberated from a communications hub. He clicked and whistled, pointing at it. He tapped into their comms. The Serpent's voice, now a private whisper in their ears, was clear and precise. "Team lead, report. Main concourse is clear."
"Clear, Serpent. Moving to Sector A habitats. No sign of the assets."
"Remember the mission parameters," the Serpent's voice commanded. "The biologicals are the prize. Do not damage the human assets. I need them alive and functional. They are the key." The confirmation stole the air from Jerome's lungs. They weren't just in the way, they were the treasure. They crept from their hiding spot, moving deeper into the labyrinthian service corridors. They rounded a corner and came face to face with another merc. There was no time to react. The merc raised his pulse rifle, the barrel glowing as it charged. Suddenly, a blood-curdling screech echoed from nearby. It was from the chittering maw of Othos. The amorphous creature, placid moments before, was now in a frenzy. It slammed itself against its armored glass, its dozens of mouths gnashing, its tentacles lashing out. It wasn't looking at the crew. It was looking at the merc. The man's non-human pheromones, his alien aggression, had set it off. The distraction was all they needed. The merc instinctively flinched, his focus shifting for a split second. Jerome grabbed Lena and yanked her into a side passage. Boro simply moved, becoming a granite wall between them and the soldier. They scrambled away into the darkness as the merc, recovering, fired a shot that sizzled through the air where they had been. They were safe, for now, but they were being herded, hunted, and they were running out of places to hide. They found refuge in a cramped, greasy maintenance tunnel, the kind of place they were more used to. The air carried the sharp scent of overloaded circuits and hot metal. Lena was hyperventilating, her scientific curiosity completely eclipsed by raw terror. Boro was a statue of calm, his presence a silent, reassuring anchor. Pip was fiddling nervously with the comms tap. They know they were the key," Lena gasped, trying to control her breathing. "They're not going to kill us. They're going to take us." Jerome leaned his back against the cool metal wall. He closed his eyes, expecting the usual wave of tired resignation to wash over him. The familiar urge to just find a corner and wait for the end. But it wasn't there. Instead, it felt like the ghost of a different man stirring in the quiet of his mind. He felt the phantom weight of a command uniform on his shoulders, heard the faint echo of a ship's engines thrumming through his bones. The janitor who calculated dwindling noodle supplies was gone. The captain, the pilot who knew the complex geometry of an asteroid field, the precise FTL calculation to escape a pirate blockade, was looking at the board. The board was a death trap, yes, but every trap had a design flaw. Every system had a weakness. His eyes snapped open, a new clarity in them. "Okay," he said, his voice low and steady. Every eye turned to him. "Okay, they're the hunters, we're the prey. But they've made a mistake. They've locked themselves in here with one of our guard dogs. A grim smile touched his lips. "It's time to let the animal out of theirs." Lena stared at him, What are you talking about?
The plan, Jerome said, the old authority returning to his voice. Part 1. Weaponize the natives. We can't fight these mercs head-on, but the Scythe Talons can. The Soul Flayer can.
To them, these mercs are just aggressive, smelly intruders.
He looked at Lena. Part 2. Amplify our advantage. You said that we smell like a pregnant queen. How do we make ourselves smell more like a pregnant queen? Lena's mind, given a problem to solve, instantly kicked into gear. The panic subsiding.
A pheromone fogger. Yes, of course the cleaning bots. They use an aerosolized solvent. If I could bypass the regulator on the dispersal unit and I could mix it in a concentrated sample of our atmospheric signature, then, well, I could create a thick cloud of the mimic pheromone. It would make us functionally invisible to the creatures, while it would make the mercs stand out even more. But I would need a high-torque thermal spanner to bypass the regulator without fusing it.
A triumphant chitter came from the darkness. Pip stepped forward, and with a flourish, produced the thermal spanner he had stolen, its chrome finish catching the faint emergency light. He presented it to Lena like a holy relic. Jerome grinned, a real grin. Part 3, he said, looking down the dark tunnel. Liberate the big guy. We open the Soul Flayer's cage. Burrow's brow furrowed.
Is that wise, Captain? It is a being of great power and pain.
It bowed to us, Burrow, Jerome said softly. It trusts us. And right now, I'm trusting it. The plan was insane. It was cobbled together from stolen parts and half-baked science. But for the first time since they'd set foot on this station, they weren't just janitors. They had a purpose. They had a plan. And they were going to take back their zoo. Lena, with Pip acting as her six-limb surgical assistant, worked feverishly on a battered cleaning bot. Using the stolen thermal spanner, she bypassed the regulator while Pip rerouted power from a nearby junction box. She poured a beaker of concentrated viscous fluid into the bot's main tank. With a final command entered on her datapad, the bot whirred to life. A thick, hazy fog smelling faintly of a mechanic's garage after a lilac air freshener explosion began to pour out, enveloping them. The corridor's red emergency lights warped and distorted through the mist.
It's working!
Lena yelled over the bot's hum.
We're inside a cloud of concentrated us!
They moved through the fog-shrouded corridors, a ghostly island of calm in a sea of red alerts. They reached the central habitat control console, a massive bank of glowing screens and keypads that governed every lock and door in the Xenovarium. The main release system was protected by a high-level security lockout.
It's no good, Jerome said, his fist tightening. It needs an admin-level pass. Veins or tib-tibs.
He trailed off, a sudden memory sparking in his mind. The holographic call, the data skim. He looked at Pip.
Pip, the pass!
Pip's large eyes blinked. He held up the small data skimming device from the bridge. On its screen, the stolen security pass glowed.
You beautiful, thieving little rat,
Jerome said. Pip plugged the device into a diagnostic port on the console. A few frantic clicks and a whistle later, the console beeped. A green light flashed. Access granted. With a manic grin, Jerome slammed his hand down on the release control for the Scythe Talon enclosure. A klaxon blared specifically over that habitat, and a massive section of the armored glass slid open. A river of sleek, feathered death poured out into the corridor. The Scythe Talons saw the crew, swathed in their pheromone fog, and ignored them completely. But they scented the mercs down the hall. With a unified shriek of territorial fury, the swarm took flight, a whirlwind of claws and beaks that descended upon the surprised soldiers. Panic and blaster fire erupted from the darkness. Their path was clear. As they raced towards the Soul Flayer's habitat, they saw her, the Serpent. Her suit's advanced environmental filters had clearly identified and neutralized the pheromone fog in her immediate vicinity. She was striding calmly through the chaos, her mercs engaging the scythe talons while she made a beeline for the main prize. Standing directly in her path, at the narrowest point of the service corridor, was Boro. But the corridor was a maintenance bottleneck, designed for single-file access and a droid passage, not for hauling heavy tranquilizer cannons and capture equipment past a 7-foot-tall rock monster. Getting past Boro wouldn't be a fight. It would be a slow, clumsy mess.
The creature within has known much suffering,
Boro said, his voice calm, echoing in the narrow space.
It preserves peace, not a new cage.
The serpent stared at him, a flicker of unprofessional frustration showing for the first time. The delay, just a minute or two, was all Jerome and the others needed. They reached the Soul Flayer's emergency release. The serpent, realizing her mistake, broke into a run, her boots clanging on the metal floor.
Stop them!
She was fast, too fast. She raised a device on her wrist just as Jerome was about to hit the release. A pulse of energy shot out, and the cleaning bot sputtered and died. The pheromone fog dissipated instantly. The air cleared.
Parlor tricks are over,
the serpent's filtered voice said as she leveled a sophisticated sidearm at them. Her mercs were right behind her. It was a straight fight, a fight they couldn't win. Then, Jerome looked up. The sprinkler system, high pressure for cleaning the amphibian habitats.
Lena,
He yelled.
your pollen!
Lena's eyes went wide. She unslung her sample bag and ripped it open, grabbing a pouch of hyperallergenic pollen she'd collected for analysis. Jerome leapt onto a railing, smashing the red casing of a fire suppression trigger. High-pressure sprinklers erupted from the ceiling, drenching the corridor in a torrential downpour. At the same moment, Lena threw the bag of pollen directly at the serpent. The fine, dust-like powder hit the water-soaked air. It instantly transformed into a thick, sticky, casein-like paste. It slammed into the serpent's helmet, clogging the intake vents of her rebreather with thick, gooey gunk. The serpent gave a strangled gasp, the sound choked off by the gunk. Air. She needed air. A sound tore from her throat. Not a command, not a threat, but a raw, suffocating noise of pure, unprofessional fury and rising panic. The cold, calculating professional was gone, erased in an instant, replaced by a suffocating animal. She clawed at her own helmet, her precise, economical movements dissolving into clumsy, desperate swipes that smeared paste across her visor. Her flawless tactics, her methodical planning, all useless against a handful of alien pollen and a broken sprinkler. She stumbled blindly, disoriented. Boro, his duty as a roadblock complete, strode forward. He didn't punch, he didn't crush. He placed his large, flat hand on the serpent's shoulder and gave a single, definitive, powerful shove. The serpent tumbled sideways, right through the open doorway of the now empty scythe talon enclosure. Pip, seeing his chance, scrambled onto the control panel and rerouted the primary power. With a deafening boom, the armored door slammed shut. The hunter was caged. The aftermath was a symphony of bureaucratic chaos. Station security, finally emerging now that the danger was past, flooded the Xenovarium, their armor polished and their faces looking vaguely embarrassed. Governor Vane emerged from his panic room, smoothing down his suit, a well-rehearsed speech of heroic defiance already on his lips. He strode into the control room, ready to spin the story, to claim credit for the flawlessly executed containment procedure.
A testament to the station's robust security measures,
he began, projecting his voice for the benefit of the security officers.
While I was coordinating the strategic response from my command center.
You mean your closet?
Vane froze. Lena was standing there, her anxiety replaced by a steely, newfound confidence. She held up a datapad. On its screen was a live feed of every public news monitor on Port Olmos, and on every monitor, the security feed was playing on loop. It showed Governor Cillian Vane shrieking and scrambling into his panic room, followed by 20 minutes of him pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. Pip, it turned out, had done more than tap the Serpent's comms. He'd patched Lena's datapad into the station's emergency broadcast system. The entire station had seen the Serpent's professional takeover, and Vane's terrified, undignified retreat. His cowardice was now the station's newest and most popular running joke. Vane stared at the screen, his face turning a shade of pale green that clashed horribly with his expensive suit. Amid the chaos of securing the prisoners, Jerome saw Tip-Tip being helped to his feet by a security guard. The little amphibian looked at the crew, his eyes wide, black, full of terror, awe, and a surprising amount of gratitude. He gave a tiny, trembling nod of thanks before being led away to give his statement. Jerome clapped Vane on the shoulder.
Tough day at the office, Governor.
As the security team led a silent, helmeted serpent and her captured mercs away, the crew stood together. Jerome looked over at Boro.
Still can't believe you convinced that thing to go back in its cage with just the promise of a bedtime story.
Boro watched the Soul Flare, which was now peacefully settled on its heated rock, having been gently coaxed back inside its habitat.
He understood it was for his own safety, Boro said. And the story was a good one. It was about building a nest of trust.
Behind the armored glass, the Kralgorian Soul Flare looked at them. It dipped its massive, bladed head one last time in a slow, deliberate bow. They had shed their labels. No longer janitors, no longer assets. They were simply the heroes of the story, grime and all. Mr. Blue Sky by ELO filled the bridge. The sound wasn't tinny anymore. It was rich and clear, coming from a brand new, top-of-the-line sound system. The bridge itself was clean, spacious, and smelled of new ship parts and freshly brewed, actual coffee. The Star Wipe, too, was a beauty. Their reward had been substantial. With Vane disgraced and the Serpent's client list exposed, the Alliance had been grateful. The black marks on Jerome's record were expunged. His pilot's license was reinstated, with honors. Lena hadn't just been proven right. She was now the galaxy's leading expert in xenopneumatic biochemistry. Multiple universities were fighting over her, offering research grants that made her head spin. They had a new ship and a new official charter. Star Wipe's Interspecies Solutions, non-lethal predator relocation specialists. Boro was sitting on the floor, patiently trying to teach a baby scythe talon to sit. The tiny creature, which Pip had found sleeping in his pouch, kept trying to playfully nip his granite fingers. Lena was at a science station, calibrating a new portable pheromone emitter of her own design. The applications for peaceful coexistence are limitless, Jerome, she said, her voice bright with the confidence that was now her default. Pip was perched on the co-pilot's chair, happily polishing a expensive-looking Alliance Fleet Commander's insignia that he had definitely, certainly, absolutely found on the floor of the award ceremony. And Jerome was at the helm. He looked around the bridge at his family. Lena, brilliant and bold. Boro, a pillar of gentle strength. Pip, the chaos agent of loyalty. He thought of the song that had been the soundtrack to his misery for so long. Clowns to the left of him, jokers to the right. The song finally made sense. It was never a mission statement for his despair. It was a roster. His roster. And he wouldn't trade them for anything in the universe. He was smiling. A genuine, unforced, deep-from-the-chest smile. The cynic was still in there somewhere, but he was no longer in the captain's chair.
"All right, you pack of weirdos,"
he said, his hand resting on the FTL drive control.
"Our first official mission. A colony of farmers on Tau Ceti F are having a problem with dune worms eating their space yams. They've asked for the best."
He looked at his crew, his family, and the smile widened. Let's go give him a hand. He engaged the drive. The stars outside the viewport elongated, stretching into brilliant streaks of blue and white. A Star Wipe 2 leaped into the cosmos, a grimy, beautiful rock and roll ship full of second chancers, off to their next adventure. Finally, a crew with a real destination.